call this work session meeting of the San Marcos City Council to order. Today is Tuesday, May 2nd of 2023. The time is 3:02. Ms. Trevino, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Prather, Mr. Scott. He is on.
Hold on.
Here.
Thank
Sorry.
you. Mr. Gleason.
Here.
Mayor Houston.
Here.
Ms. Garza. Mr. Gonzalez.
Here.
Mr. Mendoza.
Here.
We have a quorum present.
All right, first is our citizen comment time period. The City Council welcomes speakers at work sessions and regular meetings. Persons wishing to speak during the citizen comment portion of a work session needed to sign up in the city clerk's office prior to noon, or if online, to have emailed citizencomment@sanmarcostx.gov prior to 5 o'clock yesterday. A call-in number and link are provided. Speakers may speak once during the citizen comment time period and may not yield time to others. If you speak about a public hearing topic, we ask that you not repeat the same comments again during the public hearing on the same topic. You have 3 minutes to speak when you state your name. A timer is displayed on the screen. You'll see that you're in the green. When you have 20 seconds left, the timer will be in the yellow. And when the timer is red, your time to speak is up. And I think we're going to have sound tonight when your time is up. The mayor and council will endeavor to ensure that meetings are conducted in a courteous manner and an atmosphere free of defamation, intimidation, personal insults, profanity, or threats of violence. And this evening, we have several people who will be joining us on Zoom and some who are in chambers. Our first citizen comment will be Noah Brock, and he joins us online. And
Good
there he
afternoon,
is.
council. Can you hear me?
We can hear you and see you, so you may proceed.
Okay, great. My name is Noah Brock, and I wanted to start off by sincerely thanking you for voting to delay your decision on zoning of the Smart Terminal development. Thank you. Since the Smart Terminal Development Agreement is included in executive session, I wanted to provide a list of questions that you can hopefully address in this session. I emailed this to you all this morning. Among typos, there's other various conflicting information units. Franklin Mountain is listed with 2 different names in 2 different documents. The development agreement waiver for cut and fill states by right, but the exhibit G states with administrative approval. What are the wastewater impact fees from 2019? How do they compare today? Has the property owner provided a letter to opt into the city's wastewater CCN? Can there be a timeline for parkland conveyance, since fire station land does have a timeline? The term limit for the development agreement is in conflict with the city and state code. How will this be corrected? Since the property owner can make changes to the development agreement without council's approval, what guarantee will the public have in keeping these amendments in the agreement? The development agreement states that all records are recorded in Hays County, but then the administrative amendment states that it was recorded in Caldwell County. Was it recorded in both? Can we get clarification on that? In this evening's council meeting, the city staff is asking for direction on how to proceed with development agreement negotiations. We really want the whole council to weigh in on this, since the subcommittee and the city staff have already worked on it up until this point, and we have not seen a lot of progress. So how can we have a seat at the table? The community has spent a lot of time and effort getting these things to these meetings and getting this information to all of you so that you can really make an informed decision. And we want this to be done the correct way. We want it to be something that San Marcos can be really proud of. And right now, the way it sits, we're not proud of that. And we know that we can make it better. And we know that you all want this too. So help us work together to really make that happen. So thank you again, and I'll see y'all at 6 p.m.
Okay, our next speaker is Anna Juarez, and she is also joining us online. And Mr. Scott, we need you to be on video.
My name is Ana Juarez, and my address is 342 Newberry Trail. Dear Mayor, City Council members, and city staff, thank you for agreeing to delay consideration of the zoning change for the SMART terminal and for taking the time to carefully consider the largest and most complicated development agreement to ever come before the city. It means so much to me and to the community to know that you listen and seriously consider citizen perspectives. There is no need to rush this agreement. The developers have acknowledged that they bought 2,000 acres of land and are here to stay. So let's take the time to get this right for now and for the future. I appreciate that each one of you are serving San Marcos to create a safe, sustainable, and attractive city for all citizens. Unlike city-initiated or other zoning map amendments, the city does not require either personal or posted notices for development agreements. Ironically, establishment of historic landmarks or districts requires much higher levels of notification, while amendments to HI development agreements, like SMART, require almost no notifications. Had more members of the community known that the council was about to approve the development agreement in January 2023, perhaps we could have had a seat at the table and been able to research and consider this agreement prior to moving forward. Finally, I asked that the entire city council initiate a review of the development agreement and sit down with both community members and developers to discuss the many questions and concerns that remain unanswered or unaddressed. This development, the largest ever in San Marcos, is too large and too complex to exclude any council members from negotiations. Community members deserve a seat at the table, not only as onlookers, permitted to provide a pre-discussion 3-minute monologue, but as citizens in a democracy with the right to converse and participate in council and developer discussions. Please allow a space for the entire council, the community, and the developers to work together, initiate a thorough review of the development agreement, continue discussion with both the community and the developer, begin to answer the many questions still pending, and take the time we all need to make sure San Marcos ends up with a development agreement that gets it right for now and for the future. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kay Moore, who is in person. Yeah, and you can pull that microphone down wherever you need it.
Hello, my name is Kay Moore. I live at 452 Valleyway Drive, Maxwell, Texas, on a family farm that I grew up on. It lies, it lies across a gravel road from the land owned by Franklin Mountain and Walton Investments. We are a part of the San Marcos River watershed. And if you come to Maxwell or Tri-Land, I will show you our hills and valleys, waterways and drainage. I'll show you our beautiful sunsets and sunrises and unobstructed horizons. I can show you our plants and wildflowers, let you hear our bird songs, and show you where they nest and feed and shelter. I can show you our wildlife management plan and all its documentation. All that separates our land and the proposed development is a narrow gravel road. The riparian and wildlife corridors that now exist run through our land, across the land belonging to the developers, and onto the river. The same water, the same plants, the same animals and birds move across our properties. We are thankful for the rules and regulations that exist because of San Marcos and for its concern for the river. The 2,000 acres to be zoned for heavy industrial use raise a specific set of concerns and issues that need to be addressed. We need to look at these concerns and put in place requirements that will allow for development and allow for good neighbors. Requirements that minimize the impact of feared pollution, air, water, light, noise, and recognize the impact on soil and water, people, and wildlife. Let's plan for that. The asks are not huge, but they are significant to current residents and the San Marcos River watershed. We are asking for tighter controls that will ensure better environmental consequences, concerns that include water pollution, both groundwater and surface runoff, air pollution, light and noise pollution, and adequate buffers to provide protection for current residents and wildlife. You would be changing the zoning on 2,000 acres of land that currently does not generate or support heavy traffic, does not generate light or sound pollution, does not generate air or water pollution, has little or no impervious cover, that provides protection from soil and water runoff, 2,000 acres that provide quality habitat to wildlife and quality of life to human residents. These 2,000 acres will be changed forever, quiet farmland to busy, heavy industrial development. Changes that will increase runoff, will contribute to increased traffic, light, and noise pollution, will impact wildlife, neighbors, and the watershed. It is important that the development agreement provides residents, wildlife, and the watershed the protection they deserve.
Our next speaker is Maxfield Baker, who I believe is joining us online.
Hi, I can't turn my video on for some reason.
Okay, we can hear you.
Right, but I would like my video on. That is an option, correct? Does somebody have to get, okay, cool,
Hold on.
there it is.
Yeah, just give us a minute, because we're on Zoom for you. If you were here, it would be faster, so.
Well, it's not just for me. You see, Councilmember Scott is also on Zoom. Has my time started yet? I can also not see that. That doesn't seem to be visible from the Zoom audience.
What isn't visible?
I can't see the timer for this to know when my time has begun and when it will be over. It's not on the visible video that's running that's normally for the council room.
You should be able to see it, but
Oh,
I'll tell you when you hit 20 seconds.
Wait,
Okay.
if I may, Mayor, if you go into gallery view, Mr. Baker, you'll be able to see it. On your settings on your device, you should be able to see it then. Then you can see it, the thing. Just go into gallery view on your device.
I can see all the speakers.
There should be one more. Hit the gallery view and it should show it. Maybe it's after she moved you over, it got it wonked out.
Oh, there it is. Okay, cool. Thank you, Ms. Capoletta. Great. So yes, thank you, City Council, for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. For one, I would like to start by kind of revisiting the request I've made in the past to make agendas more accessible to the public and give people time to organize. To that end, I am signed up for the auto receiving of the agenda, but it doesn't go out until Monday, even though the agenda is legally posted by Friday. So it would be great if staff could just administratively move it to where those auto notifications go out with plenty of time for the community to actually organize instead of the day before the meeting. Thank you. So the thing that I really am here to talk to you about is the smart terminal. You all are going into executive session, and as somebody with a little bit of experience being in executive session, I wanted to remind you that the legal advice you are about to receive from our lawyer, our city's lawyer, is largely contextualized around preventing liability and not necessarily giving you sound policy advice. To that end, I would encourage you to push back and ask tough questions. As we saw in the cite and release discussion, while I had great respect for Mr. Cosentino, there were issues that weren't fully brought to light and that it took a little bit of academic research on my part to push back on the legal advice we were receiving regarding those issues. So I encourage you to, yes, listen to your lawyer, but recognize it's coming typically from a place of liability concerns to the city And sometimes, frankly, the city should just accept being sued for the embetterment of our community. Hopefully, the TML exchange tax dollars would help protect us in these kind of instances if that is the case. However, if you are to move forward with renegotiations, I ask, similar to Noah Brock, that you all move into full negotiations with the full of council. If for some reason that's not possible and you choose to go the route of having the subcommittee address it, I would ask that you rework the members of the subcommittee, as 2 out of the 3 were already ready to vote on the development kind of as it stood. I think that that signifies that if we want those negotiations to happen in good faith, that the community would respect that maybe some of those who voted for the postponement be placed on that committee so that we can make sure that our concerns are heard, as well as giving us a seat at the table, inviting us to those subcommittee meetings as a speaking member. Lastly, I would ask that you question the containment of spills. The developer kind of threw it out last time that there's no need to worry because we can successfully trap and keep those things from being spilled out. I would ask, what is the actual make and model of the solution that they are describing? Have they do they have demonstrated experience in managing that type of equipment and dealing with the consequences of a failure? And what are the number or percent of failures that that type of equipment is subject to? And when could we anticipate some type of failure? I think those are all standard questions that we should have a very clear answer to, and at least be able to point to and hold them accountable to should that failure happen, and when it happens, frankly. So thank you so much. I look forward to speaking to you again at 6 p.m.
And our next speaker is Lisa Marie Capoletta, who also joins us online.
Good evening. My name is Professor Lisa Marie Capoletta. They call me LMC. Thank you for postponing this agenda item and not rushing it through. All City Council members, the City of Martindale elected officials who sent you a letter, as well as the residents, deserve a seat at the table. They did not elect you. Some of you are about to lose your next election. Just like those of you who voted against the Woods, some of you are acting paternalistic, you're acting elitist with your new friends, your new donors, and you're about to fund this project on the backs of the working class here in community. We all got our property taxes. It seems like the elected officials, which now your pay is up to $1,700, and city staff are getting pay raises. We are not. And there's a lot of questions of what we're going to pay for. They're saying it's going to cost $1 million to fix that situation that the county did where all those businesses are losing their business, right? The situation over there with the, I don't know, whatever. You guys know what I'm talking about. How much are we going to pay for these fire stations and all this infrastructure? We cannot afford it. Thank you, Saul. Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Alyssa, and thank you, Jude. I will be your hardest campaigner. That is presupposing that you continue to vote the right way. I also speak for the river, the air, the earth, against noise pollution, light pollution, and those in fear of losing their homes to pay for a millionaire's wastewater infrastructure, fire stations, and what else. We don't know, but some of you are so paternalistic in your backdoor cigar smoking little rooms, you think, well, maybe we can do it with the TERS. Maybe we can do it with the PID. Maybe we can do it with the MUD. I'm so smart. I'm elected. I know everything. And those little peons from Martindale, what do they know? And I'm sorry. You guys are making this decision out of fear based of the county. Here's the definition of fear appeal. When a baseless fear is employed for excessive or exaggerated way to persuade others to accept a concept or adopt a behavior. There is no scientific information from the San Marcos River Foundation to prove all of the harms that all of these residents, the most amount of people I have ever seen show up for any agenda item continuously over months from a different town, proving that they can solve for the harm. All it is a Band-Aid on a trauma wound. We don't know how this is going to impact not only the rivers and the streams and all of their water wells, but also the Gulf of Mexico. And in addition to that, we don't know the total cost. Your city staff refused to give us a drive-out price because you're the experts, right? You, Mark Gleason, are the expert. You, Jane Houston. You, all of you who voted for it, you know it, and us little peons don't know anything. And the little city staff and their backroom cigar sucking time are going to say, well, in the future, this is how we'll fund it. We can't afford that. And by the way, Mayor, the thing that you read at the top, that's inaccurate. That's for the regular city hall meetings.
Cappelletta.
Thank you for your time, and God bless San Marcos. And I think an angel just got its wings with that bell.
Could be. And our next speaker is Claude Orleus, who is also joining us online.
Hello, how you guys doing today? Do you mind turning on my camera as well?
Yes, please, if you can.
It's saying that the host turned my video off.
That's okay. Council members need to be seen to be counted present.
Okay. Well, I guess no camera it is in. Oh, there he goes. All right, hello guys. On a lighter note, my name is Carter Rullis, and I'm here representing Oasis San Marcos Apartments. I want to thank you guys for adding on the agenda about the COVID-19 relief. And I'm here today just to reiterate on why the 90-day moratorium should be removed. On my last two times when I spoke to you guys, I illustrated about how people are taking complete advantage of this COVID-19 90-day moratorium. We are at a point now where I just want to give you some extra examples of what we've been going through as landlords dealing with people who taking advantage of it. We just had a resident who basically has been causing hell for her current roommates who in school. She haven't been in school for a couple of months, and her parents asked her to come back home, and she's refusing to leave the apartment complex, and she says, I know you cannot get rid of me because of the 90-day moratorium. We end up processing an eviction on her, and we walked her unit yesterday when she officially got evicted, and it was beer bottles, drug paraphernalia, food, throw up, and these type of situations continue to happen because they know they have a free ride of 90 days to be here. The people who are under this eviction and taking advantage of it usually are not the students who've working hard, who need financial assistance, who need help. COVID-19 has been around for over 3 years now, and this system has been in place. And at this point, everyone's back to work. The mandates are over, so distancing is over. Everyone is back into in-person classes, and it's the worst people who are taking advantage of this policy of not being able to be evicted in 90 days. We've had instances where we go night marketing. The person who hasn't paid rent for over 90 days, they're in the club taking shots, partying with friends, having house parties on site, arguing with their roommates. They don't have the relationship with, they're not in school or have a bad relationship with their parents when they need to go back home and need to be able to get out of this eviction. The 90-day moratorium is not helping them. All it's doing is accumulating debt. If they're not able to pay rent in 30 days, they're definitely not going to get the rent money in 90 days. And now we at a situation where someone owes 3 months of rent, they're getting evicted. This is affecting their credit score, where if we were back to regular order with a 3-day notice, they'll be able to move out. We'll probably have somebody to relet. We have people interested in taking over their spots, and they'll be putting them in a better situation than moving out with that much debt on their accounts. So I just ask that you guys, thank you for reviewing it and hearing the concerns that we had about it. And I hope that we are able to remove it, and so we can get some of these issues resolved on the site level. Thank you so much.
Okay, Ms. Trevino, do we have anyone else signed up?
No, ma'am, that's it.
All right, then we will go into item 1.
Receive a staff presentation regarding the current status of American Rescue Plan, ARPA funding, and provide direction to the city manager.
Ms. Reyes?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This afternoon, you will receive an update on pandemic funding received and expended thus far. It is a follow-up to the presentation you received on February 7th regarding coronavirus relief and American Rescue Plan funding. Today, we are also seeking direction to proceed with allocating the remainder of the second tranche of American Rescue Plan funding we have received. There's a lot of information to unpack. I also want to make sure that the last time when we talked with council, there were some areas that y'all wanted additional information. And so Mr. Meagle has put that information together in terms of the spreadsheet and working with our department directors and those project sponsors. We also have our departments here. If you have specific questions, they're either joining us by Zoom or some are in person. So just want to make sure that we provide you as much information as possible to make an informed decision. So we have a lot of information to cover. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Hayden Meagle, Administrative Services Manager, to provide the presentation and recommendation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Hayden Meagle, Administrative Services Manager. I'm going to begin by providing a quick update on coronavirus relief funds and American Rescue Plan funding the city has received. We are also seeking council direction on how you would like to allocate the remainder of the second tranche of ARP funding. At the February 7th work session, Council provided direction to look at identified projects for remaining ARP funding. On March 21st, Council approved the contract with Booth Management Consulting, who is assisting us with ARP compliance. Additionally, on April 18th, Council allocated funding toward a number of projects that had been identified to move forward with right away. Those projects are listed on the slide. Next slide. I'll go through these next few slides pretty quickly since we just went over them in February. The numbers have been updated with the amounts included in our quarterly report ending March 31st, 2023. This first slide is a graphical presentation showing the amount received and how much has been spent for CRF and ARP, tranches 1 and 2. A report with descriptions of each project, as well as the allocation and amount expended as of March 31st, was attached as backup for this item. The first source of funding are coronavirus relief funds. When this funding was awarded, the city placed it all towards staffing expenses, which freed up $2.6 million in general funds. Over 60% of those funds have been expended, and since they are general funds, they do not have the same reporting or timing requirements as ARP funding. The projects listed on the screen are those that had activity over the past quarter. Next slide. The majority of the funds received came from the American Rescue Plan Act. This slide is an overview of the first tranche of $9 million received in June of 2021. At the end of March, we had spent almost 40% of this funding. The projects listed spent funds between January and March of this year. And here's the overview for the second tranche of ARP funding. Council allocated $5.4 million of this tranche last year, and the remainder is what we are discussing this afternoon. At the end of March, we had spent just over 15% of this funding. This slide also lists some of the projects Council allocated funds toward on April 18th. This brings me to the main purpose of this afternoon's presentation. On February 7th, Council identified a number of projects that you wanted additional information about prior to allocating remaining ARP funds. We currently have a total of over $3.2 million to allocate. The following slides list each of the projects. We have city staff and representatives from the school district here to answer questions you may have about the individual projects. All of the projects and programs listed will need to be vetted with our ARP consultant to determine if they are eligible to receive this funding, and we hope to have that before we actually bring back a resolution allocating those funds. After I step through all of the projects, I will conclude with a staff recommendation. The first item is an upgrade to the Public Service Center in the amount of $500,000 to make it a fully functional emergency operations center for the city. This includes a number of technology upgrades to provide redundant phone and internet services at the site, as well as dedicated equipment for EOC staff. Next slide. The next item is $30,000 to host additional events downtown. Some funding from Tranche 1 was allocated to this area, and the $42,000 spent and encumbered in 2022 and 2023 has funded a total of 15 events. These have been deliberately coordinated to support local businesses, musicians, vendors, and makers, in addition to increasing the scale and number of events we have been able to host. The next item was originally listed as city park improvements when it was previously presented, and council asked to see if additional parks could also be improved. Funding has already been identified to cover the majority of the costs to replace the city park playground, but we are including the additional amount needed to fully fund the recent quote we have received. The additional parks considered are listed on the screen. In addition to ARP funding, staff is preparing to possibly submit these projects for community development block grant funding that you will hear about in the next presentation. The total of all improvements is over $1 million, but the recommendation only includes City Park Playground and Mill Street Park at this time. The Uland Road Quiet Zone improvements include $1.3 million to work with Union Pacific to install quad gates or cross arms at the intersection of Uland and Post Road. This has been identified as a CIP project for multiple years, but it has not yet been prioritized for funding. A railroad crossing elimination grant in the amount of $1 million was submitted in October 2022, and we are still waiting to hear if we have been selected to receive that funding. On February 7th, we received a request to include $200,000 that would go toward the Hays County Food Bank to help fund their new building on South Reimer Avenue. This new facility will have space for all the perishable and fresh food that the program needs to regularly store. It will have better access for large trucks and space for on-site distribution events. The next item is $445,000 to install a generator at San Marcos High School that would allow the high school gym to serve as an emergency shelter. This cost includes a 600 kilowatt diesel generator, automatic transfer switch, electrical installation, and associated engineering services. The next item is support for parent liaisons at SMCISD and was also requested at the February meeting. The initial request from the school district included the funding of 2 positions for 3 years. Knowing council has provided direction to avoid funding positions with grant funds, we asked for a revised proposal and received a request to fund the Parenting Partners program. This program would allow the parent liaison plus 5 other campus staff to attend 6 comprehensive workshops to receive the curriculum, resources, professional development, and coaching to build the capacity of the district to empower families as contributors to their children's academic success. An amount of $125,000 was included in the recommendation that would fully fund the first year of this program. This placeholder was included since I had not yet received the revised proposal. I think there will be an opportunity to find funding for subsequent years as we go through the process of analyzing projects with our ARP consultant. Support for caregivers was also a request made at the February meeting, and a placeholder amount of $128,000 has been included. I have reached out to Community Action, the San Marcos Housing Authority, and the city's Women, Infants, and Children, or WIC program, to ask if they had any programs that could be expanded with additional funding. The city's WIC program has proposed a program that would provide diapers and wipes for clients in San Marcos, and the Head Start program through Community Action is also interested in facilitating it. Along with the previous projects, there are a couple of future considerations for council to be aware of. Eden Village is proposing to build a tiny home community designed to provide permanent homes for chronically homeless individuals. Staff has received a request to provide assistance for the creation of this community, and will be briefing City Council about the request in executive session. In addition, we are still waiting to hear if we will be awarded the Railroad Crossing Elimination Grant, and if we receive it, we may be able to fund the remaining park improvements or increase amounts for some of the remaining programs. This afternoon, we seek council's direction on what projects you would like to fund from the remainder of the second tranche of ARP funding. The projects staff recommends, along with the recommended amounts, are listed on the slide. Next slide. The next step is to bring back a resolution allocating the remainder of ARP Tranche 2 funding. We recommend moving forward to allocate all of the remaining funding. There have been some suggestions from members of the U.S. House of Representatives to pull back unallocated ARP funding. Allocating the remaining funds at this time that we have received may help mitigate that possibility, and there is still an opportunity to reallocate it as needed. As we bring the ARP consultant on board, they will validate each of the existing projects and conduct a deeper analysis determining if they will expend all allocated funds. We will continue to report to council quarterly with the progress that is being made on the expenditure of these funds and determine what needs to be reallocated well in advance of the December 31st, 2024 deadline. Now I'll be happy to answer any questions and receive council direction.
Okay, could we go back to the slide that has the list? About 2 slides. There we go. This is what you're asking us to make a final decision on, or is?
That's correct. It's
Actually,
not the final decision, not the
because
final decision.
We're
This-
asking what needs to come back, and then we'll make a final decision. But I guess what I meant was this is probably the last time we'll be going through.
Yes, ma'am. This would be the direction for us, and what I'd like to do now that we have the ARP consultant on board is to really fully vet this program before I bring it back with the resolution for council consideration.
But right now, you're looking for our preferences.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, council, what I'd like to do is just go through these one by one, and you can tell me if you want it to stay in or out. If you want to talk about changing the dollar amount, let me know that. I can call on you, or you can,
Mayor, I have a question. Can you see if they're okay, our council, like, I'm okay with what they already put together for it. We've already been through this before,
okay,
so I'm fine with what staff recommended.
all right?
So can we find out if we have 4 people on that already?
I'm going to ask one by one, but if you all you can give me a thumbs up. I need to hear from you with something. Mr. Scott has stepped up and given me his response, waiting on the rest of you.
I can go.
Okay.
So I supported the first tranche of this money going, like a substantial amount going to staff and other projects because we can't pour from an empty cup, right? We needed to pour into our people to be able to serve our community. However, this list kind of concerns me. Economists and demographers predicted that the heaviest economic impact of COVID-19 was going to be now, right? Our neighbors continue to report not being able to pay rent, not having access to their basic needs. And while I'm all about downtown events, city park improvements, ARP funds are just it's such a unique opportunity to be able to give our neighbors what they need to survive. So this list is, I'm not comfortable with this list. The only ones that I would be interested in supporting for sure is the food bank, the generator, the parent liaison, and caregiver support. And I would have questions on the first 3. Like that's not enough information for me to be like, yeah, let's cut a check.
What were those 3 again? Parent liaisons, generator, food bank?
Basically all the ones in the bottom, yeah. Food bank, generator,
Okay.
parent liaisons,
The last
caregivers.
5.
Right. I just think there's just too much need right now from our neighbors. You talk to anybody who works in like the nonprofit sector or church groups, and they'll tell you they're struggling. It's bad. It's really bad.
Okay. Mr. Meagle, would you remind us when these funds have to be expended?
They have to be allocated by December 31st, 2024, and they must be expended by December 31st, 2026.
26, okay. And allocated it by the end of this year,
By the end of next year.
24?
But yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay,
I'll go next.
Mr. Gleason.
I'm fine with all of them. I still have a little bit of issue with the parent liaison. You know, I know we're partners with the school district, and I don't mind infrastructure and the generator, and even the caregiver support, supporting with our, working with our nonprofits for that. But it's still, I don't want that to get us to get too involved in operations at the school district. We have enough needs now, but the rest of the list I thought was pretty thorough. I am glad to see the quiet zone on there for Ewan Road. That's been something that neighborhood has needed for a very long time. And it's a quality of life and it's a safety issue there too. So I'm fine with all of them except the parent liaison.
So that's a no?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Prather, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm great with all of them. the food bank, the Hays County Food Bank, I would like to abstain from commenting on that. But like the generator at high school, I think that's very important during emergency situations. And then regarding the parent liaison, at one of our last homeless committee meeting, our consultant advised us about how that was probably one of the best assets addressing homelessness with families that had children that are in our school districts. There was a lot of feedback through them and also advice that if we could help support them, that it was probably some of our, best bang for your buck scenario, especially people that are experiencing homelessness that have families. So I think we should definitely keep that in there. I'm okay with all of it. It is extremely tempting. I see, 1.3 million other, infrastructure type funding that you're like, well, we could use that for utility assistance or rental assistance, but I think what's being presented, recommended is I'm okay with.
Oh, and I should have asked y'all, on the Euland Road Quiet Zone, staff is recommending that if we do receive a grant for part of that, that the remainder of this goes into the parks item. Are you good with that?
Sure.
You good with that? Okay. Need to hear from this side of the table.
Well, I do have a question.
Microphone on.
I do have a question on the generator. You said that was for the gym. Is it also for other areas than other the gym in case they have to stay overnight, the cafeteria and things of that nature?
I believe it's primarily the gym. I would have to go back and look at the quote.
I think that's what we talked about before, because we were talking about people being able to stay and shower, and you're right, Mr. Gonzalez, I don't think we addressed the cafeteria before.
Let me check to see. I believe we had, I think Mr. Duval from the school district who may have been sent a link.
Yes, sir.
Can you elaborate?
Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Very good. Yes, it is. So in putting this together, it was the gym to be able to provide the overnight stays, shower capabilities, locker room, restroom capabilities. The cafeteria could potentially be an option, but in the initial conversation and this quote, it was basic housing needs and then the potential of outsourcing the food from a different location, depending on what the event, the emergency event is, and where we would have continual power. But I'm not going to say that, yes, definitely the cafeteria is one of the areas, but it is most definitely an option in this package in order to be able to provide food for those individuals that need that assistance.
Yeah. One other question about the same subject. Is the high school fed twice by two different sources, electrical sources? And do they have a transfer switch for that?
Yes. And that will be, all of that would be included within this package from on the generator. It would be a one switch system that would connect to, it would override and connect to the areas in which this was fed.
Well, I'm not referring to the generator. I'm referring from the city side. Are they fed twice from two different areas? And if they are, do they really need the generator?
I do not believe we are fed in two different areas.
Can someone from staff answer?
I would be speaking out of turn if I answered that question for you.
Ms. Reyes, do we have anyone from SMU?
I don't know that we have Mr. Herworth on, but we can check on that.
Okay, but I'm sorry, I'm looking for clarity for me, Mr. Gonzalez, because you brought up some stuff we didn't talk about before, and I'm glad that you are bringing it up. Are you asking if the high school comes from two, that if one's out, they can be fed from another source?
Some areas have two different power lines.
Right.
And if something happens to this transformer, it has a transfer switch, it will transfer the power to the other source. And that transfer usually takes about 15 minutes to transfer.
Yeah.
Therefore, if we have that capability, they won't need the generator.
Right, but if we're in a situation like we were with the ice and there's just no power coming,
We're up the creek. No, that, I just wanted those
Is
answers.
there-
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're dual feed or not.
Mayor, we can check that before the actual vote.
okay. I was just going to say, if y'all could find out about that. However, I think maybe one of the reasons why cafeteria didn't occur to me is that when we have had, we've used the activity center for folks to stay with, the cots, et cetera. Usually the food is sandwiches and, things like that. We didn't have a cafeteria to support that. So I think that's why it didn't occur to me, perhaps.
Right, right. But if they lost power and they start going inside the cafeteria, before you know it, what's in there is gonna, it's best to leave those doors closed
Right.
to maintain that temperature. No, Mayor, I'm good with what's on this list. I'm glad that the Ulen Road quiet zone is in there. They've been asking that for a long, long time, but I'm fine with it.
So you're good with all of it, but we do have the question on those sources for the other. Mr. Mendoza?
I will say I do kind of debated with myself here on the Ulen Road, but I do agree that it's about time they finally have that improvement. I will say that I am very grateful that we are moving forward with getting the money to the new food bank. I will say that I am very grateful to the parent liaison program that we have going on with SMCISD. I have seen the results from it, and I think it's a very positive thing. And I think this is a way for us to help encourage it
Okay.
to stay strong. But where it stands right now, I support the 3.2.
You support all of this?
Yes, ma'am. I support all this right now.
Okay, I'm good with all of it, except my concern on the parent liaisons. I am fine with giving dollars for, I'm just going to call it by the fancy word, stuff. I'm not good with us funding employee positions for the school district. I think the school district needs to do that. I don't think we need to be getting into that.
And that's exactly why we went back to them and said, I'll admit, my first request to them was wide open, and I didn't
Not a
include
bad
that
idea.
parameter. And then I got their proposal, I was like, ooh, wait a second, I don't know if we want to include positions on here. So can you come back with a revised proposal? And that's what this is. For the parenting.
We'll just say
parenting
stuff.
Program.
Okay, but not employee
But
positions?
no
Okay.
employee positions. It's training.
Training?
It's
only?
training. It does also, let's see, I think we
Go
might
back.
also have Ms.
Ye-
Villanueva.
Yes, and I am here, Elena Villanueva. And so what it is a program that is going to work as a dual capacity building framework for our staff and our families, where we can begin with a campus team, train parents, and then have that turnaround where parents are training other parents. I think
Okay.
really will help us just build like the relationship, but also teach our families and ourselves, ways about how we can connect better, shift our current beliefs and values that we have, build confidence within our families and ourselves, because we've seen that just us alone with an SEL counselor here and there or a parent liaison, we really are not reaching all of the families that we need to be reaching at the campuses. And so we really want to build the capacity of our staff along with our parents, where we have a leadership team together.
Okay, I'm good with that, too.
And I'll
Okay. Are
change my,
y'all-
and I'll
we're
change
all
my
good
support for
with
that too,
that?
after
Okay.
all the further information.
Okay. So you and I were kind of in the same place, but
Yeah.
now we're good for that. So, there are 6 of us that are okay with all of these. Ms. Garza starts with the food bank to the rest of the list and has reservations about spending the dollars on the first 4. But that is 6 to move forward with all of this, and we're hoping that everything will get a green light. And then it will come to us for a final vote, is that correct?
Correct.
Yes, we'll bring a formal resolution back to the council. The other thing that's really important is just because the federal government has been saying that they were going to take some of the CRF dollars that had not been allocated, so we really want to make sure that we're not short of needs, so we need to make sure that we're getting in there and getting things allocated. Of course, as we go through and we look at projects that either may not, come through to fruition, or maybe it's coming under budget or something like that, we will be bringing those things back to council for you to look at and determine where those dollars go. So there still may be some more opportunities to look at this, but at least this gets everything allocated for now, and then we can go forward with the formal resolution that'll come back to you once the ARP consultant looks at everything.
Correct. And we've been bringing every reallocation, we're planning on bringing that back to council as well. Since the original allocation was by resolution, any reallocation would also come to you.
Okay.
Mayor, I have one question.
Go ahead.
On the Uland Park Quiet Zone, do we have an estimated timeline, and the federal government's going to give us an answer on that?
I think we're already expecting to have received an answer on that, since it has been over 6 months.
Okay.
But yes,
That's
not any specific time.
Okay.
Timeframe.
That's all. Thank you.
Hopefully
Mayor.
in the next month or two.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
We did get an answer from our utilities director on the question related to the power feeds for the high school. They are fed by 2 different lines or wires, but essentially from the same substation, so they really just have one source.
Okay. But if there's something between it and the substation, which is just good to know. All right. And Mr. Beagle, Ms. Reyes, is there anything else you need from us?
I think that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Trevino, we will go on to item 2.
Receive an update on the Community Development Block Grant CDBG Annual Entitlement Funding.
Ms. Reyes, are we?
So this time of year is not only budget development season, but it's also the time in which applicants for CDBG funds are received annually. Staff will be reviewing applications in May and presenting a slate of recommended projects for next year's funding to City Council on June 6th. Therefore, this seems to be the ideal time for an in-depth look at the CDBG's funding allocations over the past few years in preparation for decisions on what should be funded next year. Carol Griffith is going to be here to talk with us about she's the Housing and Community Development Manager. She's going to present information on that. But it's also timely because of some of the concerns that were just brought up a few minutes ago in regard to our neighbors and some of the struggles that they're having. It'll be good to see where some of your other dollars that we have available to us through our entitlement in CDBG are going and what staff's recommendations are on that. So, Ms. Griffith?
Okay, thank you. So I'm here this afternoon to provide an update about the city's Community Development Block Grant Entitlement Funding, which is the approximately $700,000 that the city receives each year. Next slide. First, let's look at the timeline for this year's funding allocation process. The application period is open until May 8th of this year. We are already getting applications. City Council will hold a public hearing June 6th, at which staff recommendations for allocations will be presented. After a 30-day public comment period, the proposed slate of projects will come back to City Council for a final decision. Next slide. Now I'll go over briefly some of the criteria that impact CDBG funding, and I always wanted to start with the mission. So it is to promote the development of viable urban communities by providing decent housing, a suitable living environment, and expanded economic opportunities, principally for persons of low and moderate incomes. And this is the foundation for all funding decisions related to CDBG. Next slide. So for next year, HUD has informed us that we will be receiving $712,899 for the 2023-2024 fiscal year. So of this, 70% or $499,000 must benefit people with low to moderate incomes. San Marcos tends to allocate funding such that closer to 100% of our funding benefits people with low to moderate incomes, and that is in line with HUD's vision for the program. In addition, of this annual funding, only 15% can be used for public services or social services, and no more than 20% can be used for administration or planning. Next slide. Only the following types of entities can receive CDBG funding to administer a program: a nonprofit, public housing authority, city department, or another governmental entity. Next slide. As you know, every program or project must meet a national objective. For San Marcos, almost all programs meet the national objective of benefiting people with low to moderate incomes. The housing demolition program that we have could also be justified under the elimination of blight. In addition to this, to the national objective, programs and projects must meet other criteria that have been set by the City Council and preferably also serve the city's strategic initiatives. Applications are accepted each year for programs, and they are scored by a staff committee according to evaluation criteria. Then the recommended slate of programs is taken to City Council for approval after a 30-day public review period. Next slide. Now I'll go over in detail how the CDBG entitlement funding has been allocated over the past 4 years. This slide shows, not counting the coronavirus funding, the city has received $2.9 million for fiscal years 2020 through 2023. Of this, 19% has been allocated to administration, 27% to non-housing such as social services and parks, and 54% to housing, mainly housing rehabilitation. Next slide. So the next several slides will show the allocated amount in blue and the amount spent in green. And just keep in mind that this is the current year and 3 years back. So some of it hasn't been spent yet because we're in the current year. First, I did want to start with the coronavirus funding. In addition to regular entitlement funds, in 2020, the city received $993,000 in CDBG coronavirus funding. The city has spent $804,000 of that, which is 81%. So we met HUD's goal for spending 80% in the first 3 years. So yay us. What remains to be spent is $188,000, which will be spent on a new rent and utilities assistance program. This program is currently slated to start in June and will be administered by BR3T, our partner for that program. For coronavirus funding specifically, approximately $33,000 or 3% was spent on administration, $55,000 was spent on abused children through the CASA program, and $150,000 or 15% was spent on support for small businesses during the pandemic. Next slide. Also, a quick note before I go into the past 4 years, I want to mention that the city has CDBG funding left over from the fiscal year 2019 allocations that is available to be spent on land that will be used to construct homes for low to moderate income people. As you know, it was very difficult to find suitable land at a reasonable price during the pandemic years. As of April 2023, staff are now actively looking for land to purchase, working with the city's real estate manager. We hope to find suitable land that can be purchased and then either used by the city to construct housing using home grant funds through the state, which is an idea that we have for the future, or used by Habitat for Humanity. This funding must be spent this year on land acquisition, or it should be reallocated to a different program next year in 2024. Annual funding must be spent within 8 years, and so reallocating it next year would give us a couple of years to spend it on something else if necessary. So next slide. Now let's look at non-housing related programs over the past 4 years. This graph shows funding allocated for the 2019-2020 fiscal year through this year, 2022 to 2023. We have, for example, if you look to the left, we have $145,000 allocated for administration this fiscal year, so that is showing as unspent on the graph. Due to the number of staff this funding supports, we always spend the full administration allocation every year. And I'll go through each individually and give you some details on this graph. Next set of numbers, over the past 4 years, funding has been allocated to the CASA program for abused children, and in the past 2 years, funding has been allocated to the Hayes Caldwell Women's Center. This makes up the $296,000 budgeted for these programs. Those organizations are in process of spending this year's allocation, and they always make full use of every penny provided. Next on the graph, we have the rehabilitation funding for Centro Cultural Hispano de San Marcos. This funding is from the 2021 fiscal year. We expect this funding to be spent in 2023. This project was slightly delayed when the organization underwent some staff changes, and then last August, with new volunteers in place for the project, staff brought a modification of the project to City Council for approval. So the project has also evolved into something different. They will now be updating their HVAC system and replacing the roof of the building. The thing that has delayed the project since then is the decision by the school district to donate the property to Centro. So this was a new wrinkle. In April, the city received the survey and special warranty deed needed as backup documentation for the resolution approving the transfer. And as soon as we receive the executed copy of the donation agreement, the city will be able to finalize the environmental review and execute the subrecipient agreement for this project. And then the project can begin. We've had several meetings this year with the staff, the volunteers at El Centro, and they are really ready to go. So next up is the allocation for Dunbar that included an inspection of the Jackson Chapel United Methodist Church and the creation of a revitalization plan for the Dunbar area. Since the Dunbar area plan process through the city's planning department came about, the scope for this CDBG project has been reduced to a review of the church only. Unfortunately, it has been determined by experts through this funding that the church is unable to be rehabilitated. An additional payment request for $2,400 and the documentation of the church's review will be submitted shortly, and this project will be closed, having served its purpose. The emergency assistance funding shown next is for the Salvation Army, and it is for this year. So that's why you don't see expenditures yet. We have every expectation that it will be fully expended. Finally, on this graph, we have the Paul Pena Park project. This is also expected to be completed this year. The environmental review is underway and the final project details are being established. The Parks Department expects it to go very quickly once we have that environmental review complete. It'll be replacement and installation of playground equipment, installation of a shade structure over the playground, extension of a sidewalk, and installation of a skate spot. Next slide. Finally, I'll provide an update on housing-related CDBG allocations over the past 4 years. Starting with the left, the Homebuyer Assistance Program provides up to $12,000 in down payment and closing cost assistance for buyers with low to moderate incomes. This program was very slow in 2021 and 2022, but the housing market seems to have shifted because the city is once again receiving applications from prospective home buyers. A major issue has been the ability of buyers with low to moderate incomes to find homes in San Marcos they can afford. However, with the influx of applications in 2023, staff expects this funding will be fully expended by mid-year. Next is the Housing Demolition Program. A little bit of information about demolition in San Marcos. The city does not require homeowners to demolish homes that are in a blighted status. So the city has to get permission in order to demolish a home. Owners are required to board them up, but demolition is voluntary. Code Compliance has identified a list of homes that will not be able to be rehabbed and have been working to find the owners in order to gain permission to use CDBG funding to demolish the structures. Finding the owners or heirs to these properties has been difficult. However, I am happy to report that Corridor Title has stepped up to volunteer to provide title research for these properties and has connected city staff to a couple of realtors who will voluntarily answer questions for the responsible parties on how to create a clear title for the property. Code Compliance and Community Initiative staff, the realtors, and Corridor Title staff are all actively working on this since the city cannot demolish a home without a clear title. And I'd really like to commend Corridor Title for stepping into that program. They have trained us a little bit more about the process and it is really rolling, so we're excited about that. Next is the Home Ownership Counseling Program that is administered by Habitat for Humanity. Habitat provides counseling workshops and one-on-one counseling for the home buyers in the Home Buyers Assistance Program, but also any other people interested in understanding more about the financial and physical responsibilities that home ownership entails. This program was in person originally and was not well attended online during the pandemic. Now that the services are once again offered in person, the program is attracting more interest. Finally, let's talk about one of San Marcos's highest priorities, housing rehabilitation. Over the past 4 CDBG funding cycles, the city has allocated $1.1 million to housing rehabilitation. Of this, $272,000 is for rental housing that is owned by people with low to moderate incomes, and $860,000 is for owner-occupied housing. An additional $867,000 has been allocated for owner-occupied housing rehabilitation through the American Rescue Plan Act. All of this funding is on hold for the same reasons, and I'll provide more details on the next slides. We are optimistic that the housing rehabilitation program will be able to restart in June of this year, and we already have contractors in place ready to do the rehabilitation work once the program begins. Next slide. Okay, sorry. Getting my thoughts together. Regarding the CDBG and ARPA Housing Rehabilitation Program, I'll provide a brief history, the next steps, and information about upcoming changes in the program. Next slide. This slide shows the timeline for the housing rehab program. Staff placed the program on hold in June 2020 after receiving the monitoring report from HUD. This report contained 10 findings, 5 concerns, and 2 recommendations, which is quite a lot for a single monitoring. HUD required that staff revamp the program entirely and create new policies and procedures. This was completed by April 2021, and staff began working on requests for proposal, or RFPs, for contractors to do the rehabilitation work and for estimators to create independent scopes of work and cost estimates for each project, or each house, basically. The estimator RFP was published in 2021 and received no responses. The contractor RFP was also published in 2021 and received 3 responses. All 3 contractors were selected for the program so that a high volume of work could be accomplished at once due to the levels of CDBG and ARPA funding available. Staff decided that since we had been unable to procure an estimator, we would have the contractors provide the scopes of work and cost estimates for each house assigned to them. In February 2022, we opened the program for applications and began the intake process of ensuring that each homeowner was eligible due to income and ownership status. We sent the contractors to 22 homes to create scopes of work and cost estimates before placing the program on hold once again in September 2022, when we learned that having an independent estimator is absolutely essential in order to be able to meet HUD financial requirements in 2 CFR 200. In February 2023, a second RFP for an estimator was published. This time we notified all the real estate inspectors in the immediate area individually of this opportunity. Next slide. At the March deadline for the RFP for an estimator, the city once again received no responses. This time, staff extended the deadline to April 20th and issued a summary letter about the program to all real estate inspectors, lead risk assessors, insurance adjusters, and single-family housing contractors in the area. Staff also posted the letter on the InterNACHI Inspector Association website. No responses were received by April 20th. However, an update had to be issued April 19th, clarifying that the insurance requirement for the company is $1 million, not $5 million, and therefore the due date was extended by the mandatory 10 days to May 4th. So if no responses are received by May 4th, this type of procurement will be changed from a request for proposal to an invitation to bid. Staff believes that one reason for the lack of response may be the complexity of the response required for a request for proposal. Our invitation to bid is a much simpler process, and we hope to achieve successful procurement of an estimator at last. I checked for the latest update. We have received 1 response. We think we will not be able to accept it because it's from one of the contractors, so it will actually be a conflict of interest. So we may have to bring that to City Council to deny before we can move forward with an invitation for bid, but we will move absolutely as fast as we can to get that done. Next slide. So here's what can be anticipated as next steps for the housing rehabilitation program. In May and June, several activities can begin at the same time. While the city sets contracts in place with the estimators, and that's if we get good responses to the request for proposal, staff can reopen the program and contact all the prior applicants and interested parties. They will need to provide up-to-date income and ownership information to ensure they are eligible for the program. In July, as the estimators begin visiting each house, the site-specific environmental review can be completed by staff using the information provided in the scope of work. Once this review is complete, contractors can begin working on the houses assigned to them. The contractors we have in place are able to work on multiple houses at the same time, so we should have 9 to 15 houses being rehabilitated at any one time. Next slide. Now I'll talk about a few changes coming up for the Housing Rehabilitation Program. As you know, under the leadership of Ruben Garza, Southside Community Center administered the CDBG Housing Rehabilitation Program for many years. Mr. Garza held a contractor's registration with the city, and the Housing Rehabilitation Program was important to him personally. Now that he has retired and unfortunately died, Southside does not have the in-house expertise to continue the program, and the board has decided to stop the Housing Rehabilitation Program and focus on other public services. Next slide. As you will recall, Southside Community Center has been allocated CDBG funding for housing rehabilitation each year of the past 4. Now that Southside is no longer in the housing rehab business, we need to reallocate that funding to the city to administer the program. Otherwise, Southside would have to sign off on invoices for which they have no actual responsibility. Staff will be bringing forward for council consideration amendments to the CDBG action plans in order to request reallocation of the funding. Since action plan amendments will already be underway for this purpose to reallocate the Southside funding, we will also be proposing combining 2 other pots of housing rehabilitation funding as well to create basically one owner-occupied housing rehabilitation program for each year of funding. For several years, the city allocated funding for emergency repair separately from housing rehabilitation. The same policies and procedures apply to both programs, so we will be requesting to combine the funding into one program that provides for both substantial housing rehabilitation and then also smaller emergency repairs that can happen more quickly. More information will be provided on May 16th for discussion and action. Finally, also on May 16th, staff will be asking City Council to set a lien term for housing rehabilitation for the first time ever. The Housing Rehabilitation Program, run by Southside, generally spent $15,000 to $20,000 per house. When the Housing Rehabilitation Program was open last year and the contractors created estimates for 22 houses, we found that the cost per house is now closer to $35,000 to $50,000 per house, and the list of repairs needed is more extensive than had been seen in past houses. I would also say the Southside program tended to focus on the most important repairs, and when we revamped the program, HUD has emphasized a substantial home renovation, like putting it all together into a truly livable place in a certain standard. So typically, CDBG programs stop being grants and start being deferred forgivable loans at $25,000. This is not a direct CDBG requirement, but is considered a best practice to protect the real property investment in affordable housing. Staff will be recommending a 5-year lien term reduced monthly by a percentage of the loan amount. The proposed 5-year term is the same as what City Council approved for homes constructed on the owner's lot with CDBG disaster recovery funding. Because this would be a deferred payment loan, the homeowner would not have to pay the cost of the rehabilitation back to the city unless the home is sold, at which time the remaining balance of the loan would be paid to the city. Next slide. And that should be the end. I'm happy to answer any questions, and so to provide you with a full update.
Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. Gonzalez, turn your microphone on, please, sir.
Thank you. The Home Buyers Rental Assistance Program, what average of a house are they buying? What's the average price?
You know, I don't know for sure, but I know it would have to be in like the upper 200s to very low 3. That's the most they would be able to get.
Okay. Someone at that price range surely has to make over, $150,000 a year if it's close to 300,000. I thought this was more for the affordable, needy, to assist those people.
It really is. So what we find, so for one thing, anybody who goes through the program has to have a low to moderate income. What we find is that they're mostly moderate income, not low, because people with lower incomes are not able to afford a house in San Marcos. We find that's a very tight market. And so we would love to be providing funding for a much lower housing price that fits the income of the person. We don't want to put people into houses that they can't afford. However, if they're able to get a mortgage loan with their income, what we can do is put in that home buyer assistance amount to help them buy the house. So it kind of depends on, their credit rating and that kind of thing. But what we are finding is that it tends to be, honestly, new homes that are coming in. And oddly enough, it seems like the existing homes either don't sell or sell very quickly and so forth. So does that give you the information that you needed?
Well, yeah, but I was just hoping it would help the people that are making under $100,000.
Sure.
People that are making $150,000, I think they could afford having those $15,000. Another question is, you talked about demolition some homes, and you got a title company working for helping y'all out do that. Who gets that title after you do all the homework on it?
The owner of the property. So the main point of that process is to clear the title to the point where it's very clear who the owner of record is. So generally what happens is code compliance knows of people who need help with demolishing a structure, or it's also for the rehab program, this title clearing process. And so they bring these people to us, and then we find out, we look at it and we're like, oh, we can't tell who really owns the home. But code compliance already has that relationship with the person who's living there. And so we are working with the people who live in the home to clear the title so that they have title, if that's appropriate. It ends up whoever.
Good luck. There's a lot of bickering when it comes to things of that nature.
It is quite a process, yes.
Yeah. On helping people just to an emergency situation with their homes, when did that program start? We talked about it a couple of years back. Did we ever implement that?
It is not. It's all on hold because we have to have an estimator.
And it's been like that for a couple of years without an estimator?
4 years.
Yeah, because I always tell my constituents, hey, there's programs out there.
Right.
And they call up here and they say, there's no such thing, Sal. See how there is. We've talked about it in council and it should be there.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But it hasn't started yet.
Not yet, and yeah, it's not a good situation.
No, we also talk about y'all's contractors. We're only maybe 3 cities out of the state of Texas that has a special contractor's license. Should we open it up to the general public? I think we're required to take a test of some sort. How many cities in Texas have that? Require them to have that state license to do work in their city?
To have the local license as well?
You're right. That's the one that, we're the only ones, us and Seguin, I believe. There's nobody else that has.
2,
Yeah.
that's correct.
Like that, we can help people that are contractors, but are not, they can do the work and everything else, but the test is so difficult for them. It's just hard. How do we get to the point that we have to take that big state test to become a contractor?
I'll need to refer that to Amanda, or it's really Elizabeth, but we think Amanda can.
Amanda Hernandez, Director of Planning and Development Services. The brief answer to how we got to this point is that it's in the city's code of ordinances. So it's a requirement that was established by City Council. I don't have the year for that, but it is in our code, so it's something that all of our contractors have to comply with.
Yeah, I think when we had a lot of people that were in the dais were contractors. I guess I can bring this up in another time.
No, what you need to do is to email the usual bunch to get this on an agenda.
Thank you, Mayor.
But I'll second it when you do that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Sorry, that's all I got. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Who's next? I raised my hand, I don't know. Go ahead.
So for the folks who have submitted their applications, have they been kept up to date regarding all of this?
I don't think we've done a great job, but we have certainly received calls. We have, our recurring customers, and I'd be one of them at this point. So we have, of course, talked to anyone who's called in, and I would say all of them by now have the message that the program's on hold and we'll be getting back with them whenever it starts up again.
Okay, so they all know.
I would
right
think
now.
so. I mean, I can't guarantee it, but
Because
yeah,
they have like applications on file or something, right?
they do, yes.
Right. Yeah, I think it would be great if you guys could just like let them know what's up, that, the money's there, we had barriers, and we're working towards fixing it.
Yeah, I think so.
that would be good.
Okay, if we can go back one slide. Are there things that you need us to make decisions on today to move anything forward? Or I'm thinking this was more informational to us as to what's happening, not happening, why it wasn't happening, and that this is just informational update for us?
It is.
Okay.
And so May 16th, we'll bring you some things for consideration that are specific to the rehab program. And then June 6th, we'll bring you the CDBG applications for next year for your first look.
Okay, sounds good. All right, then, if there's nothing else, Ms. Reyes, did you have anything else? We will close out item 2, and we will move on to item 3. Ms. Trevino.
Executive session in accordance with the following: A, Section 551.072 of the Texas Government Code, real property to deliberate the sale, lease, or value of city property located on Limekin Road. B, Section 551.072 of the Texas Government Code, real property to deliberate the purchase or value of real property regarding potential use of eminent domain as contemplated by the River Bend and Riley's Point Development Agreement. C, Section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code, consultation with the city attorney regarding the law and legal matters related to the development process regarding the Smart Terminal project and the development agreement.
I'm looking for a motion to go into executive session. Somebody's got their, would you turn your phone off the audio, please? Thank you. Okay,
So moved.
thank you. Looking for a second to go into executive session?
I'll second it. I just got kicked off the internet.
Okay. Ms. Trevino, let's vote about going into executive session.
Okay. Mr. Scott? Mary Houston?
Aye.
Ms. Garza? Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mr. Mendoza? And Mr. Prather? Okay, the motion passes 6-0.
All right, so we are going to go into executive session. Council, I will give you a break, so if you would be in the large conference room at 4:30. Next item is a question and answer with press and public.
We do not have any speakers.
We do not have anyone here, so we have concluded that item. Council, I would accept a motion to adjourn the 3 o'clock meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Mendoza, seconded by Mr. Prather. Ms. Trevino, let's vote.
Mr. Prather? Aye. Mr. Scott? Mr. Gleason?
Aye.
Mary Houston?
Aye.
Ms. Garza?
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez? And Mr. Mendoza? Aye. The
All
motion
right,
passes.
we are adjourned at 5:35.